All right, how's everyone? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live. Apologies for the delay this evening. All of my settings, for some reason, are in a different language, and I can't tell what I'm doing on Facebook. It's so if you write a comment in on Facebook, it's going to appear in a different language, and I won't be able to tell what you're saying. But anyway, moving on. Thank you for joining me. For all of you on Instagram over here, thank you. And for everyone else on Facebook and YouTube over here, thank you for joining me. Tonight, I want to discuss probably two things. And I say two things because last week we had scheduled tonight's live to be all about pigmentation. But it appears that the actual post that went up earlier this week is about pushing the boundaries of your energy-based device in winter. So we're going to do a little bit of both. How's that? So let's first talk a little bit about needling, what it is, why it's actually great for pigmentation and scarring, scar revision, wrinkles, fine lines, and so forth. So let's first take a quick look at needling. First of all, needling is usually provided with a pen. Previously, it was delivered with a roller. But now we actually use a pen, or most clinics use a pen. Some still use the old school roller, and that's okay. And so what happens with our needling device, it creates a mechanical wound, right? So basically we're creating this trauma, and what it does then is it releases your platelets, so blood. And it depends on how we're actually delivering the treatment. So if we're actually needling to the point of where we're releasing these platelets, we get the fibroblasts being sent to that area, in addition to various growth factors. When we're needling to just inflammation, so no real petechiae or bleeding, and just maybe a little bit of pinpoint bleeding, but mainly inflammation, we only get the fibroblasts being activated, I guess, through that wound healing response. And therefore, we're only getting your collagen, elastin, and your glycosaminoglycans being sent to that area as part of the wound healing process. However, when we needle to a point where we get pinpoint bleeding or petechiae, we actually then get, like I said, a whole heap of these growth factors. And that includes your vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF, which is going to help with angiogenesis. So if you've got someone who has older stretch marks or old scarring, then this is going to help with the creation of more blood deeper down into, let's have a look, here we go. Can't oh, we're getting more of these, by the way. There's a new shipment coming in this week. But we're getting more vessels being created in that papillary layer to allow for better circulation, toxin clearance. We're getting better nutrition. So circulation is going to be really important for that wound healing process. We're also getting beta-3, so epidermal growth factor beta-3, which is going to help with regeneration of course, skin and new collagen. So that's also really important when we get the pinpoint bleeding. And in addition, there's a few more things that happen. We get an upregulation of interleukin 10 occurring. Now, interleukin 10 is actually great for reducing inflammation, unwanted inflammation long term, and it's also great at synthesizing or helping with hyaluronic acid. Now, who doesn't want more hydration in the skin? Now, the other thing that we see that happens when we needle and when we get pinpoint bleeding, needling, is a downregulation of MSH, so melanocyte stimulating hormone. Now, if we reduce MSH, we're reducing a little bit of that hyperpigmentation for when we come to push those boundaries when we're doing those other treatments that are a little bit more aggressive, if you like. So when we do needling before other treatments that are quite intense, then what you'll find is that we're reducing the incidence of PIH, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. Okay, so do you like how I tied in those two things together there? So with that, we're also seeing a reduction in the melanin granules and also in the size of the existing melanin granules too. So amazing for pigmentation. And that's why when we do needle, we do see a little bit of that, not retoning, but reduction in that unwanted pigmentation. Right, so it does help with not just the texture, but also the tone of our skin as well. So when we're doing that needling, there's going to be different time frames of when you're wanting to perform that treatment. Depends, of course, what it's for. But when we're doing collagen induction, I do follow Des Fernandez, who says weekly, every 7 to 10 days is when you should be performing needling for optimal collagen induction. When we're doing inflammatory skin conditions such as rosacea and melasma, then of course we're extending that out and where there's a much more gentle approach. So it really does depend on what you're trying to achieve when we're doing our needling treatment. But for pigmentation, you're also wanting to combine this with other melanocyte inhibiting ingredients such as your licorice root extract, your arbutin is another one. You've got paper mulberry extract, bearberry extract, which is amazing. And also there's a product that you'll find in, or an ingredient that you'll find in our Skindividual, which is IBR-TCLC. And that's been clinically proven to reduce pigmentation within 28 days. So that is in our vitamin C. So you'll find that as well. Now, with pigmentation, if it's epidermal, we can use our light and heat-based, not heat-based, but light-based modalities such as your laser, your 532 laser, because our 532 will be targeting more of that superficial pigmentation, whereas your 1064 will be targeting more of the dermal pigmentation such as post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, melasma, and anything else that is dermal. However, when we're treating melasma, we know we need to be really careful with heat. So Pico is going to be a better way to treat dermal pigmentation or melasma. So with Pico, what we're doing, it's a photo acoustic or a photomechanical principle. So we're not creating any heat in and within that melasma, and of course, making sure that your client is on various, inhibitors and inhibitors, right, are going to be the way to go with your dermal pigmentation with your Pico. If you've got a Q switch, that's fine as well. But definitely when you're using your Q switch, your 1064 Q switch for melasma, we're wanting to cool the skin before, during, and after our treatment to avoid that melasma from rebounding. Now, what are the types of pigmentation can we treat? Really, epidermal pigmentation is going to be the easiest to treat because it is a lot more superficial. Of course, we've got our melanocyte residing in the basal layer, and of course, when you're looking at topicals or delivering topicals to pigmentation, it's going to be much more easier when we're dealing with epidermal pigmentation. We can also treat epidermal pigmentation with our plasma. It's Nina, you just said, hello Nina, how are you? That's interesting. Not many people use cooling with their Q switch, no. And I think because, I'm going to go back to what you're saying, Nina, I think because oftentimes we're taught when we're using light-based modalities, we want heat. But when we're treating that dermal pigmentation, so your melasma, you need to cool because it's the heating of the skin that's actually causing that rebound, isn't it? So I know not many people teach clinicians or therapists to use cooling, but it's really important. So what I was saying before was when we're treating epidermal pigmentation, we could also use different inhibitors, lighteners and brighteners, and we can infuse that with electroporation. So we've got our Apollo device, so which utilizes electroporation and ionophoresis to actually help with the infusion of products. So that causes cell permeability, and it ensures that the product goes into the skin transdermally in a most efficacious manner. So there are other ways to infuse products in the skin, but your sonophoresis is another one. So using ultrasound, so those vibrations are going to help push product into the skin. There's high frequency. There's so many other different ways, of course, to push product into the skin to help with pigmentation. So with that, what other devices do you have that I haven't mentioned? I know I just said your plasma, like PlaqueSpot, for example, or your diathermy, which is we're using that off-label to basically spray that epidermal pigmentation in order to help it lift, desiccate, and actually basically slough off, within a week or two. So you've also got your plasma fibroblasting that's going to help as well. So is there a particular device that you have that you think is amazing at removing or managing pigmentation? If you do, write it in the comments box. So Nina's saying it's so important because a lot of training teaches to treat melasma with Q-switch and doesn't really cover the risks being involved, being photoacoustic, definitely. So that is something to always keep in mind when you are treating with your 1064 for melasma, that we're making sure that you know the risks, or you advise your clients they can't go out in the sun, they can't sit in front of a heater, they can't have hot showers, not just while they're being treated, but all the time, because it's that heat, it's that inflammation that is going to trigger that pigmentation or melasma to come up, come up to the surface. Oftentimes you'll also hear about treating with the melasma. There's a lot of that vascularity, and treating that vascularity that comes or goes hand in hand with the melasma. So again, if you're finding that someone has melasma, reducing that inflammation with LED, and in particular our green LED, is going to really help inhibit that inflammation, which then in turn has a flow-on effect and helps that pigmentation. So reduce inflammation, we're going to find that we're reducing melasma naturally. Let's have a quick, Alicia, I feel like I'm plateauing with IPL for sunspot, treating with my 530 Superlux. Okay, so before I move on to treating in winter, Alicia, that's a really good question you've got there. So she says she's plateauing with her IPL device. She's got a 530 Superlux, obviously by Global Beauty. So Alicia, quick question for you. Two questions. What color is the pigmentation? And what posturation are you using? I lied, 3 questions. And are you treating with the cooling? How many snowflakes are on your device? So all of those things are going to make a difference when we're treating pigmentation with IPL. So I'll just wait for Alicia to write her answers. By the way, if you've been treating with a 560, you might want to try with a 530 if you're plateauing. But if you're actually going and using your 530 and you're plateauing, let's have a look at the reasons why. So Alicia, if you can tell me what, here we go, it's still brown, basic setting, untouched 22, there we go. Are you using cooling or no cooling? So she's saying she's using 22 joules with a basic setting. Your posturation should be roughly between 13 and 15 milliseconds. And what you should do, if it's a lighter brown, you could actually draw with a white eyeliner around the actual pigmentation and use either a baby wipe or no cooling. Good. Okay, that's usually part of the problem. So we do not want any cooling when we're treating pigmentation. And you can isolate the actual area and go up to say 24 joules and see what happens. And remember, every machine is going to be different. So 24 joules on one device is going to be different, 24 joules on another, and depending on your handpiece, on your applicators too. But Alicia, what you could do is increase that energy. So go up to 24, and if nothing happens, then test patch another on another day or another area, and go up to 26. And just keep test patching until you see that pigmentation starting to change a little bit. That's really important that we get some kind of change, and you keep increasing that energy until you find there is that change. Otherwise, what are you doing? We're not really then doing much, right? So failing that, you could try double passing. Again, you need to be very careful when you're double passing that we're not over treating. So it's all trial and error, and you're only test patching little bits at a time, just in case there is too much heat and you end up with a blister, of course. So just remember, keep test patching until you see a change. All right, so you're welcome, Alicia. Hopefully that helps. And failing that, I don't like saying this online, but you have to be really careful. You could try your acne filter. But if you want more information on that, feel free to reach out. And we do Hour of Power with myself, where we can give you some customized advice, tips, and protocols. I can write up some protocols for you. Hello, Ada. I haven't seen you for a long time. All right. So another question was Ultimate Skin Aesthetics. So is laser genesis combined with microneedling for scarring, and how many sessions is required? You know, that is another great question. We've gone right off topic, but I love these. So with laser genesis, our 1064 is actually going to be absorbed, or is highly absorbed by water in the skin. And of course, your 1064 laser genesis is creating this bulk heating further down, down in the dermis. So one is photothermal, so we're creating heat in the skin. And our needling, depending what depth you're trying to go to, your needling, you could be going to roughly 1.5 at the most, depending where on the face, anywhere from 1 to 1.5. Around the eyes, of course, it's going to be a little bit less, but 1.5 is probably just under that papillary layer. So with your laser genesis, what you're doing is you're heating here with your 1064 using 300 microseconds, so it's a long pulse. All the whilst when we're doing our needling, we're actually targeting a little bit higher up, further down in the papillary or past the papillary layer. And so there's two mechanisms of action happening. One, we're creating this bulk heating down further down, and two, we're creating a mechanical trauma further up, and therefore it makes them an amazing combination to use together. We're able to get maximal collagen induction, if you like, and at two different depths of penetration using two different types of trauma, essentially. So one mechanical, one thermal. So yes, in that instance, you would not be treating that client weekly when we're combining modalities. You would be waiting 28 days, of course, so 2 weeks in between. Danielle Crifo, how are you? How are the kids? So you had a question. You mentioned Dr. Des Fernandez, and he says to needle 7 to 10 days apart. How many sessions would you do as a base to treat epidermal pigment? I would say 3 treatments in succession. So 3 treatments every 7 to 10 days apart for that epidermal pigment if you're using needling. And we find that that works really, really well for pigmentation and of course rejuvenation as a whole. All right, last few minutes. What did you want to talk about? Treating in winter. Okay, let's just change over. So how can we change up our settings for winter, you need to be really, really careful. What I have seen, especially this winter, is an increase in people going overseas. So many people I know are going overseas, and you need to take that into account, because when they come back, their melanocytes will be firing up. So please be careful. Now, if your client isn't going overseas, if they're staying put and there is no tan, and of course they're they're protecting their skin from the sun anyway, even the winter sun, we can push the boundaries a little bit. And the reason for that is our melanocytes, especially in a skin type 3 and higher, are not they're not as active as they are in those warmer months. And nonetheless, you still need to be wary of those people who have lots of hot showers, who have saunas and go to the steam room, or sit in front of the fireplace, because what happens then, even though it's not UV, it is the heat that will still stimulate those melanocytes. So just also keep that in mind. For those who are wanting to push the boundaries, there's a number of ways you can do so. You can do so by manipulating your settings with your IPL or your laser, and that is by shortening your pulse duration just to get a little bit more, except if you have a Global Beauty Group device. You're not to touch your pulse duration if you have a global device. Just keep that in mind, because it works a little bit different to other devices that are out there on the market. So you can otherwise shorten your pulse duration. Of course, be careful when you're treating vascular lesions. You don't want to be treating, personally, I know a lot of manufacturers will say treat at 10 milliseconds. When I'm treating vascular lesions, I hesitate a little bit, because you do get purpura, you get a little bit of that bruising, and who wants a client to be bruised, really? So if you're going to shorten your pulse duration, I probably wouldn't go any shorter than 13 milliseconds. 15 to 20 is usually ideal. 15 for more superficial telangiectasia and superficial redness, and 20 for those capillaries that are a little bit darker and deeper. So you can increase your energy or you can decrease your pulse duration with your lasers and your IPL for pigment and for vascular. For hair removal, and especially if you're at the point where that hair removal is fine, you could reduce your pulse duration, or what I'd rather you do is I would actually prefer you to do a double pulse. When you've got that finer hair that's stubborn and you want to really push the boundaries in winter, you could try to go in with a longer pulse duration on your IPL or your laser. So, let's say, for example, with your IPL, you're normally using between 30 and 40 milliseconds. What I would do if the hair is no longer falling out, I would actually heat up the hairs, and I would go in with, say, 60 or 80 milliseconds. We're not going to destroy the follicle, but all we're going to do is heat it up, and then we're going to go in with a 20 millisecond pulse duration to then go in and destroy that follicle. So essentially what you're doing is a double pass, and what that's doing, it's like getting a, hopefully there's no vegetarians here, it's like getting a chicken and cooking it straight from the freezer. You're not going to get an even distribution of heat, are you? You're going to first defrost it, and then we're going to roast it. And it's the same thing with your hair. You're going to heat up that follicle, prepare it, and then you're going to go in with a short, sharp pulse duration and really be able to destroy it. Because 20 milliseconds on its own is way too short to heat up that finer, lighter hair. So first prepare the area, heat it, and then go in with a pulse duration. So you could quite easily do that in the cooler weathers to get more out of your devices. We've talked about vascular, we've talked about pigmentation, so reducing pulse durations. Radio frequency is colorblind, so whether you're treating your clients in summer or winter, it's not so risky, but nonetheless, always in summer, because those melanocytes are firing up, you do need to be careful that we're not pushing the boundaries too much in summer. And this is where RF and RF needling is amazing, because it is colorblind, but definitely in winter, you can push those boundaries a little bit more. And you would do that not by extending the time of heat that's in the skin, but by combining modalities. So you could quite easily do radiofrequency and needling, or radiofrequency and IPL, or radiofrequency and any other type of device that you've got, as long as we're actually doing it in a stepped approach. You might do your needling 1 week, make sure the skin's fine, and then next treatment you might go and do radiofrequency, make sure it's fine. And if so, we can start combining those two modalities together. So we can combine, and especially in winter, it's even better to do that than in summer. Christina, hello. So radiofrequency, is RF okay with melasma? No. Again, with melasma, it is exacerbated by heat, and radiofrequency is all about achieving between 39 and 41 degrees of heat. So, definitely it's not ideal, and I would not be doing or treating anyone with radiofrequency or even plasma. Plasma generates a lot of trauma and a lot of heat. And if you do plasma fibroblasting on top of where there is melasma, you're only going to make matters worse. So if you've got someone with melasma, we can only help them manage their melasma, but we can't, obviously, get rid of it. And even then, once we've actually got it to a point where we can't really see it with the naked eye, that client needs to make sure that they're still using inhibitors and sunblock and so forth. Hopefully that makes sense. What else have we got here? All right. So laser, you can push boundaries with laser by either, now it depends what you're doing. If we're doing laser genesis, then you can push those boundaries by doing maybe more passes in the area to get more heat happening. If we're treating with HIFU, HIFU is another one that is underutilized too, when we're combining modalities. But with HIFU, again, you can combine treatments, so radiofrequency and HIFU, or let's have a look, 580. If you've got a 580 nanometer wavelength with IPL, you can definitely do that with your HIFU. Hello, Maddie. How are you? So yes, you can combine HIFU with different modalities, especially your 4.5 mil cartridge. If we're doing 4.5 and it's reaching all the way down to our SMAS, then we can combine radiofrequency, laser genesis, needling, IPL. There's so much you can combine with HIFU, because it is targeting, and in particular our 4.5 mil cartridge, it is targeting much, much deeper than any other type of modality, whether it's light or heat based, that's out there. Anyway, Sky, hello Sky. So Sky says, can you recommend a device for RF and microneedling? Now, is this just RF and like microneedling, or RF microneedling together? So if you're looking for an RF device, we have one. It's the Apollo Duet, which is a radiofrequency and electroporation. So we've actually got that, we've got an end of year financial offer together. RF needling. Yes, we do. If you want to PM me, we've got an RF needling device that we can recommend. It's called the Domatrix, and that's through MM Beauty. Mike will be able to help you out there. If you just say to Mike that you found out through us, then I'll train you. How good's that? So hopefully you all found that useful and helpful. And if you have any questions, send them my way. So next week, what are we going to be talking about next week? Let me have a quick look. You're welcome, Sky. What have we got on the agenda? What are we, June 21st? So next week, join me. We're going to be talking about Pico versus Q-switch lasers. So what's the difference between Pico and Q-switch when it comes to tattoo removal, pigmentation, melasma, and other treatments? So really, next week will be a great one. So if you're thinking of getting a picosecond laser, this is the one to watch. Or if you want to just know what the difference between Pico and Q-switch, what the difference is, join me next week, same time, 7:30 next Wednesday. Nina, laramide peels. Yes, actually, you just wrote some protocols for laramide, didn't you? So laramide peels and ampules are amazing for melasma. Those results have been good. Can't wait to start using those in our treatments. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm sorry about the delay. All of my Facebook settings are still in Asian. I'll have to figure it out. See you. Thank you for joining me. Good night. Bye. Oh, one more thing. Hey, I'll have to show you this next week. Can't wait. Bye.